And Tibet also has its first
Welcome to
case now,
Healthcare
which means that the
Sucks.
disease
And
has
we're going
spread
to tune
to
into
all of
something
China.
different for a minute.
The National Health Commission just held its daily briefing at 3 o'clock today, where it gave some updates, and one of them is about the acute shortage of protective suits that hospitals need. And the officials gave the assurance that they have made arrangements for these garments to be imported, and they are on the way. The Hubei governor had said yesterday that they are in such dire need of these protective suits that some medical workers have had to resort to wearing raincoats and use disposable garbage bags as shoe covers in order to protect themselves. And these doctors and nurses sometimes have to stay in the isolation wards for extended periods of time because they cannot afford to waste these supplies, as they would have to change into new ones every time they come in and out of the wards. And as the week-long Spring Festival holiday comes to an end, there are concerns that another travel crunch, where millions of people go back to the cities to work, will bring about another spike in infection numbers. And the officials at today's briefing also took pains to give the assurance that whether it's planes or trains or buses, there will be stringent controls in place to deal with the crowd. So there will be temperature screenings, there will be on-site quarantine facilities, improved ventilation controls and disinfection. And they also encourage travelers not to travel during peak periods and to protect themselves by wearing a mask at all times and practice good hygiene.
Right.
So as the spread of the disease expands to more countries and in greater numbers, the World Health Organization is meeting in about 3 hours to decide whether to declare this epidemic a global health emergency. And if that happens, that means that there will be a more coordinated international response to this epidemic, and the WHO will be allowed to make recommendations on how to deal with this, the spread of this virus globally, such as recommending screenings at borders or issuing travel advisories.
I see. Now, Dawn, we just had a story earlier in the show about Singaporeans being evacuated out of Wuhan. More governments around the world seem to be intervening one way or the other. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, the evacuations are taking place as we speak. We've had the 92 Singaporeans come home on a scoot flight this morning. The United States also flew about 200 Americans out of Wuhan, and they were screened at a military base in California. South Korea and France have made arrangements, and Britain, Indonesia, Russia, Spain, Morocco, Australia, and New Zealand are also making plans to evacuate their citizens. These countries have varying degrees of screening their own nationals once they get home. Australia, South Korea, Singapore, and New Zealand, for instance, they will quarantine everyone whether or not they show symptoms. The United States and Japan have chosen to implement voluntary isolation. And in the case of Japan, that decision has caused some backlash because 3 people who returned tested positive for the coronavirus, even though they showed no symptoms. And the authorities had actually let 2 people go home without getting screened because these people refused to be tested. And according to my colleague, Japan correspondent Walter Sim, this issue has now blown up in Japan, and Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has had to explain to Parliament that there is no legal basis for the authorities to compel these citizens to go for further tests. Besides the foreigners who are being repatriated from Wuhan, Chinese Aviation Authority has also just approved charter flights to bring home Wuhan residents who are now stuck overseas because many domestic and international airlines have cancelled flights to and from the city.
Right. Now, Dawn, on a final note, before we let you go, what are your thoughts on the situation so far?
Wow, where do I even begin? When we first started tracking the story in December, my colleague Elizabeth Law went to Wuhan to report on site. And at that time, the outbreak had just started and the numbers were still relatively low and there was no evidence of human-to-human transmission. And people she spoke to seemed pretty relaxed about it. And, hardly anyone was wearing a face mask on the streets. And, not a single person thought that it would suddenly spread so quickly and so aggressively, to consume the whole province and the whole country and to even spread overseas. So we still don't know, what more will happen and whether this epidemic will be severe and whether it will be prolonged. But there seems to be consensus that China is doing everything that it can to contain it. And even though there were some criticisms that it didn't act fast enough, I don't think anyone right now is really saying that it's not doing enough. So we will all just have to hope that it can be contained and there will be no new epicenters that will emerge in other parts of China or in the world.
Right. Once again, thank you so much, Dawn, for coming onto the show and letting us know what's happening overseas. Now, still on the Wuhan virus, the speed at which it has spread has got a lot of people worried. Now, one key question on the top of people's minds is the Wuhan virus more severe or deadly than SARS or MERS? Here's a quick recap. SARS, the first pandemic of the 21st century that swept across the world in 2003, infecting over 8,000 people and killing around 800 of them. MERS, which surfaced in the Middle East in 2012 and spread to 27 countries around the world. I'm now joined by senior correspondent Eileen, who looked at several metrics and compared the Wuhan virus to SARS and MERS to tell us which is worse. Welcome, Eileen.
Hi, Dylan.
Now, Eileen, which metrics did you use and why?
Okay. I looked at the mortality rate, how severe this disease can get. That means how many people actually can get severely ill from it. And we also looked at, who are susceptible to it and succumb to it. And then we also looked at how efficiently this virus actually transmits jumps from human to human. Right. The reason why we looked at these metrics is because, these are the questions that people are asking, and they are very valid questions.
Now, Eileen, let's take a closer look at these metrics. Tell us about mortality rate and severity.
Okay. Now, I have to say that it's extremely difficult at this point in time to nail down actually the mortality rate, because these are figures that are still changing every day, right? Yep. So if you were to divide, say, the death figure by the total, the confirmed infections, I would think that it's premature because both numbers are jumping. Besides, there are very many mild, undetected cases. As we know, authorities here, as well as the WHO, they have said that 20%, this virus actually, or rather 20% of patients get seriously ill from this virus, with pneumonia and so on. And the rest are mostly mild, even undetected.
Yeah, I was just going to touch upon that,
yes.
Those who are getting seriously ill, I think you brought up quite a good point. Now, of course, Eileen, of course, one of the most urgent priorities is to determine the efficiency at which this virus can spread and is transmitted from human to human. Could you explain a bit more about that?
Yes. I think this is one question that's on everyone's minds. Yeah. Now, of course, in China, we know that it's spreading, right? It's still flaring, this epidemic. Now, the thing is, the exported cases, and in Singapore, we are seeing so far only exported cases. There hasn't been, touch wood, any spread within our community, It hasn't actually spread beyond. Now, remember during SARS, people caught it in hospital. Okay, people who happened to be in hospital caught it from people who were severely ill with SARS, who coughed and sneezed and so on. And then they went out into the community and spread it out. And so what happened was, during SARS in Singapore, there was a cluster of infections at the Pasir Panjang vegetable wholesale market. And then in Hong Kong, there was even a more tremendous spread in the community where someone caught it in one hospital and then went home, and he then spread it to over 200 people who lived in the same wing of his building block. So this is what we are looking out for. I think, it's very reassuring at this point that, although I must say that there has been human-to-human transmission in 3 instances in Germany and in Vietnam and in Japan. Okay, these were isolated people who contracted the virus, but then again they haven't spread it onward.
Right.
Yes. So I think if we were to compare now and SARS, I think it's quite different now. I think various countries, we now know we are a lot better prepared. And I see that being very different this time around.
Right. Well,
yes.
Thank you so much, Eileen, for joining us and sharing with us your analysis. As always, do visit straitstimes.com for the latest on the Wuhan virus. Now, speaking of which, we'll be hosting a special Q&A session with a healthcare expert on Monday's episode. So do get in touch with us in the comments below if you have any burning questions regarding the Wuhan virus. There we have it.
And back with Healthcare Sucks, guys. Different outlook, different news, okay? I'm trying to get different news inputs besides quick little, updates on what's going on and, flashy little 2-second scenes and stuff. I figure if we get some news, not over here, the 5 channels of BS, aka fake news, we get some of their news that's coming out of some of the other countries over there. You're going to get a real prospect of what's going on. So I just wanted to give you guys a different taste, different little bit of news. It doesn't hurt to have different opinions and things. And but as you see, the words they are using is plague. Definitely comparing it to the other two, Mars and SARS. So I think this bumpy road is far from over. And with that, I will be making another video real soon. And remember, healthcare sucks. Over and out.